he was parked outside of O'Hare, so the O'Hare International Airport on October 5th at around 9:45 p.m. And he said he spotted a tall creature with bright red eyes and large wings. So specifically, he said that, and this was from his initial report, and he'll add on to this later, but what he started out by saying was that I was sitting in my car waiting for my next Uber or Lyft call. He actually entered in his report Uber/Lyft, and the specific reason for that, if I may digress briefly, is this guy doesn't want people to know where he works, and he doesn't want people to necessarily know, who he is, because his concern is that he's going to take a bunch of flack for this because he's reporting a monster sighting. And so he starts out by saying that he was sitting in his car waiting for his next Uber/Lyft call. And I was parked on the side of the road near Toll Booth Plaza 31. It's a spot many drive-share drivers like to park to be close to the O'Hare terminals, which allows us to pick up rides from the airport. As I was sitting there fiddling around my car, I saw something walk out of the trees. It was a tall creature about 6 to 7 feet tall and kind of hunched over. It walked with a sort of gait like almost a waddle. It was completely black, and when it swiveled its head, I saw 2 bright red glowing eyes. This thing opened a pair of large wings, as wide as it was tall, and began to flap them. It took off and headed to the south toward that large indoor driving range in the baseball park. It was gone in a few seconds. And so that's obviously very interesting. And I noticed that my friend and colleague Manuel Navarrete over at UFO Clearinghouse had picked this story up too. And so I had contacted him, and I contacted MUFON's Illinois State Director, Sam Ronto. And Sam told me that a MUFON investigator had exchanged a number of emails with this witness, but that the witness was so far refusing to talk on the phone or meet them. And so he added to that that the investigator that was following up on the case knows the location very well, and he planned on interviewing some folks around the site. And furthermore, he described the demeanor of this witness as odd because he said that most folks are anxious to talk, give more information or help in any way. So I can tell you that has not been my experience, specifically really with these Mothman witnesses. And I don't think that's a fair assessment, frankly. I don't think that's a fair thing to really judge a witness by. They're, if they are reluctant to come forward and put themselves in the spotlight or be examined or put under a magnifying glass, I don't think that compromises their integrity. I don't think that it changes the veracity of their story at all. So I personally took a little issue with that, when Sam said it, but, Sam and I can disagree on stuff, and that's fine.
Well, Tobias, I think sometimes people, just are scared to say, because, again, that they don't want people looking at them like they're strange. I mean, the person reported what he saw, I take it, but, I can see the point where he doesn't want to go any farther. I mean, a lot of people are that way. I mean, seriously. I mean, if I would be in a position back years ago when I was working for various places, I wouldn't want to come out and say, well, hey, I saw it. Yeah, I kept, like the Bigfoot story, I kept my mouth shut for years and years and years because you know why? Because I knew if I told people or even reported it, I would be looked at as strange. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's a hell of a way to compromise your career, your social life, just top to bottom. Every aspect of your life can be turned upside down if you happen to be one of those folks who gets, well, God forbid, like national media attention or something like that. I mean, forget about it. That is a nightmare. That has never ended well for anybody. Not one witness who has gotten that kind of attention, I think, would be willing to say that they're glad they did. I mean, nobody. And so, yeah, I thought that was weird. I thought it was really, really just sort of beyond the pale as far as skepticism, and it's certainly not how I would react to any witness, So now I know Manuel got out there and he was able to photograph the site and stuff, and my other friend and colleague Lon Strickler from over at Phantoms and Monsters. Now he was actually able to get a hold of this witness because after this witness had spoken to the MUFON guy, who, I mean, again, he really rubbed him the wrong way. Like the witness did not react well to MUFON's pressure at all, and so he didn't want to talk to them anymore. And he found Lon online, and he sent him an email, and basically, what he said was, well, he was very confused and upset, I think, sort of by the way, he was treated. He literally asked, he asked Lon, actually, which, obviously Lon didn't have the answer to this, but actually asked Lon, why was this MUFON investigator so pushy and aggressive towards me? Because it really has an effect on people. You can't push them. You can't make it seem like you're trying to interrogate them. Like they're not going to respond well to that. And Lon corresponded with him through email some, and he was eventually able to convince this guy to talk to him over the telephone, which was the exact thing that MUFON was never going to get to happen with how they were going about this. And he filled in some more details, not much. I mean, it was really just sort of minor stuff. Like he was able to remember, specifically what he was doing in his car, which isn't necessarily important. But yeah, he was, fumbling with some charging cables and he had, basically had these cables that lead to the backseat of the car for his passengers to use while he's in the car. And so he's fumbling around with them, and he had the passenger side windows down to give his AC a break, basically, And as he's fumbling with these cables is when he sees movement, and that's when he looks up and sees the creature coming out, from this line of trees. And so, he was able to describe it just a little bit more. He said it was big and 6 to 7 feet tall, and it was human-like in appearance, and so roughly humanoid shaped, which is pretty common by these description. And also interestingly, he described the color as almost solid black. And so that's been a really common quality among these sightings so far. Like if anybody is familiar with the 2010 sightings we received out of Rockford, which is, maybe 45 minutes or an hour northwest of Chicago there. If anybody's familiar with those, both witnesses who were completely unrelated, did not know each other at all, saw something just like this, basically, in the summer of 2010 outside of Rockford. And both of them, in their description, described it as being almost completely black. Actually, they they described it as being so dark that its color resembled fresh tar. So I mean, that's pretty black. And so this guy, now again in Chicago, outside of O'Hare International Airport in 2019, is basically describing that same thing. So he's saying, he couldn't really make out any real features at all. It's just solid black. And so he says that it swiveled its head around, like it's sort of looking and scanning around, and that's when he saw those glowing red eyes. And so he said the rest of this thing's body was pretty thin, and he said that he remembered making a note that it looked like a thin person sort of hunched over. And it said its arms, he thought it was hunched over because its arms went all the way down to about its knees. And the thing's wings were about as wide as it was tall, which would give it a 6 to 7 foot, wingspan. And he said that they were bat-like. And again, interestingly enough, it had this sort of weird waddle as it walked. Like not like a penguin necessarily, but more like the stride of a large bird, like in emu. And so, he's there for a few seconds looking at this thing, and it didn't last very long. It was a relatively brief look. And, the other interesting part is he said he remembers that he wasn't the only one there. There were 3 or 4 other drivers, because this is a popular spot for these, rideshare drivers to park, because they have easy access to the airport from here, so they can go pick people up and whatever. And so other people had to have seen this thing. And now we haven't got in contact directly with anybody else yet who has, but I do know that I think Lon received an inquiry from one of them. Hopefully, we'll get more information on that. But it can be difficult to get people to talk about stuff like this, as evidenced by how this case has played out so far. And that was about the end of that sighting. We really hope that we can get more people to come forward, obviously. And there was a minute there where we're sort of scrambling to do some damage control based on how MUFON had handled this. And I don't know the investigator personally. Sam didn't give me his name or anything. I generally get along with Sam, so I don't want to disparage him. He's a very nice man, and I've met him several times, and he's always been perfectly pleasant. And when I contact him about a story or getting information on a report or something, he's always very forthcoming, and I always have really appreciated that. So I do know from my time as a MUFON field investigator that you attract all kinds when you're with that organization, and I think a lot of people who get involved are very enthusiastic, and I think it's very easy for somebody who is very enthusiastic to
go overboard.
So, lose sight of what's really important, which is the people. It's the human experience. Like, that's what's important. It's taking care of people who have had these, life-changing events, frankly. And so these guys get so gung-ho that they just completely lose sight of that. And it turns people off. Nobody wants to, jeopardize their personal life for just to give some stranger a story that they'll do God knows what with. Like nobody cares